hopefully Fiona's on the line and she can pop in. Fiona's with the Bundaberg Bio Hub up in Queensland. We can't get up to Queensland to have a look because we're all locked out. But there's things going on up there that are pretty interesting. I think Bundaberg, because of its location and tropicalness, can grow a lot more stuff than other parts of the world. So is Fiona online, Tash?
Yes, online.
There you are. Right.
I think the video is frozen, so I might actually stop the video and just share my screen if that works.
Yeah, otherwise, has Tash got your presentation that she can flick in?
Yeah.
I do,
So,
but let's see if Fiona's will work first.
Okay.
Okay, well, let's give it a go.
Yes, give it a go.
Okay.
Okay, here we go. Is
quick
that coming up for everyone?
Fiona, just while it's coming through, could you just give us a quick bio introduction just for a minute, if you wouldn't mind?
Yeah, sure. So Fiona Waterhouse, CEO and founder of a company called Utilitas Group. We actually have been around for 10 years developing biogas projects around Australia, and we are now developing out our own biohubs, as we call them, which essentially aggregate organic waste, and we are now producing renewable natural gas. So the picture that you're seeing on site is...
It's not showing, Fiona. No.
Oh, okay.
Try again.
Let me try. Hold on. Let me go back and see why it's not sharing. 2 seconds. Share screen. Hold on a sec. All right.
Sounds promising.
Sounds promising.
Yes.
Is that better?
Looks good. Oh. Yes, there we go.
Okay. All right. So the picture you're seeing on screen is the Bundaberg Biohub. The mode area is the former Bundaberg East wastewater treatment plant. Just to orientate you geographically, beside it is the sugar mill and the distillery, the Bundaberg rum distillery. So it's right on the edge of the industrial precinct, on the edge of the CBD in Bundaberg. This sewage treatment plant was a 50,000 equivalent person sewage treatment plant. It retired in 2018 and we acquired it. The transaction went through in June this year, and we are now repurposing it for energy and resource recovery and biomanufacturing. So 9.5 acre site. One of the things you'll be most interested in, I think, given the audience, at this site, we're using it to reduce the risk of early adoption of all the different kinds of technologies that are related to taking biogas and upgrading the gas for grid injection and transport fuel. We will be producing hydrogen from this site, and I'll outline a bit of the early stages of the development later through the presentation. But the oxidation ditch, which I'm not sure if my mouse works, but does my mouse work when I show you that long oblong thing on the right-hand side?
Yes, it does.
Yes, it does.
Okay, so that's a former oxidation ditch, which is a normal part of a wastewater treatment plant. And we're actually going to knock the western end out of it, and we're going to turn that into a silage bunker to demonstrate in Australia silaged biomass for biogas production, for upgrading for the gas grid and for transport fuel. So that's a key component of what we're doing. So at the moment, it's not really viable to produce a plant with 50% silage. You've got to get paid for at least 50% of the waste streams. And at the moment, as James was talking about carbon price, there is no price on carbon at the moment, so there's no incentives that we can factor in to our economic models either. And we're expected to supply the green gas at black parity. So at the moment, the economics are very challenging, and I guess we're looking to use this site to showcase all of the equipment, how it all fits together, and to demonstrate the business model and the supply chain model, and start to do a few key things like integrating silaged biomass into the biomethane production. So I might just move on from there. So Utilitas Group, we exist to unleash the power of biogas in Australia. That's to fuel industry, very much about industry and agri-industry, support networks, including the existing energy networks, and energise communities. And certainly the work we've been doing, it's taken 7 years to originate the Bundaberg Biohub, and we've been deeply embedded in the local community in doing that with industrial, municipal, and community engagement and relationships. We really see this is all about self-reliance. I was very lucky. You guys are from New South Wales, most of you. I was very lucky. I grew up in Newcastle, but I actually wanted to be a farmer. And I worked for my dad's recycling company when I was young. So I sort of understood commodities and recycling, but really I wanted to be a farmer. And I was very, very fortunate to get selected to go to Hurlstone Agricultural High School in the second year of girls in 1980. And I got to live on what was then a working farm, working dairy, piggery, poultry. We took our cows to the Royal Easter Show, and I got a really great introduction to agriculture. So I've been deeply committed to regional communities and agriculture my whole life, and I guess the difficulties of trying to build a biogas development company in Australia, it certainly has been quite a challenging 10 years to get to here. But I really feel now that what's changed is self-reliance. I think although rural communities have always been self-reliant, I think the big aha moment for the rest of Australia is our greater need to be self-reliant. And so I think self-reliance is actually the thing that is going to allow us to drive a very different landscape. And it's my view that that will advantage regional communities and rural communities. And I can tell you that I spend every day of my life trying to make that the case. So what's changed? One of the other big things that has changed is the big energy owners, network owners and wholesalers are now writing down their asset books in significant ways. So you might have seen last week APA Group, which owns a lot of gas grid network in Australia, they started some discussions via their annual report to the ASX that they would be looking at writing about $20 billion off their asset values. And I think what's happening is people are saying, well, unless you can get renewable gas into the gas grid, then people are going to move to renewable electricity entirely, and that gas network infrastructure is at risk. Now, we know in regional communities that the majority of the fuel is actually currently diesel that powers regional communities and may not have a natural gas grid as well. So it's certainly not going to be an answer for the whole of Australia, but certainly getting renewable gas into the gas grid and starting to show its role as a battery and as a service station, if you like, to supply gas on a broader footprint for use in vehicle fuel and industrial applications, I think is going to get a growing sense of urgency as these big infrastructure owners move from their assets being at risk of being stranded to essentially becoming the central backbone for renewable natural gas as a deeper fuel supply across Australia. I think one of the key things that the rest of the community hasn't yet comprehended is that anything that can be made from fossil fuels can actually be made out of modern organic material. So at the heart of our biohubs, if you like, is a biodigester, so an anaerobic digester. People have been utilising the methane from their anaerobic ponds for a very long time in dairy and in piggery industries, also a little bit in sewage treatment. But industrializing biodigesters so they play a greater role in community infrastructure, I think is something that we're going to start to see in coming years. And I think the self-reliance message and the need to get renewable gas in the grid is starting to drive both those agendas. But pretty much anything that you can make out of fossil organic material, you can make out of modern organic material. And in my view, that stands regional Australia in the best stead because they are the owners of the bulk of the organic material. So I think that is something that positions rural and regional Australia in a position of strength. Our business model is to build essentially industrial parks around retired or stressed existing wastewater treatment plants. They could be municipal wastewater treatment plants or industrial wastewater treatment plants. And they are typically linked. When you have big food processing facilities, they usually have a liquid stream of trade waste that goes to a sewage treatment plant for treatment, as well as their solid organics. So we seek to interject between those two things and look at reducing the cost for industry, reducing the cost for municipalities, and getting green gas moving in the Australian economy. I
Fiona,
think
sorry
this is
to
something
interrupt.
that,
Sorry,
Yep.
we've just had a comment come through. Fossil fuel asset write-down will be a game changer.
yes. Good.
Sorry to interrupt.
No, 100%. And I guess this is the thing that this slide is the slide that kind of, you know, makes me keep going no matter what. There is an absolute dependency in Australia's transport systems on oil. And that those two black bars in the middle, we just haven't changed. We are completely dependent, the transport component of our transport sector, or the transport component of our energy sector is completely dependent on oil and on foreign oil. And so I think that really self-reliance that is coming from the COVID environment, I think will start, and these asset write-downs, we will absolutely have to start focusing on that at a big picture level in Australia. I think there's been a lot of barriers, and it was interesting that James mentioned about and the question that came up, that there would need to be a lot of coordination in order to be able to aggregate a cooperative of people that might want to aggregate organic biomass and make their own fuel. That is absolutely true, and that's why Utilitas exists. We exist to aggregate the feedstocks and the offtakes and to pull the whole development together. But there certainly has been some significant kind of legacy issues, if you like, and James certainly touched on the lack of policy, or when we do make policy, it tends to be very reactive and not well thought out. So we end up in the situation that we've ended up with in the carbon discussion. There are no incentives for greening fuel, and in fact, there are some disincentives unless you make a paraffinic drop-in diesel from biogas, which we can do, but it's more expensive. Then basically we're still going to be subject to a whole bunch of costs and things for traditional fossil fuel that will be overlaid on top of the renewable fuel. So there's still some very big kind of systemic issues that need to be worked through from a policy point of view. We also have a bit of an unsustainable mindset in Australia. It's kind of go it alone, do nothing kind of pendulum that sort of swings backward and forward. We're required in producing these new assets, and our goal is 100 of these biohub assets across Australia by 2030. God, where am I? But we're actually required to supply the fuel at essentially black parity. So that means the same price as the non-renewable fuel. So that's the expectation. So in doing that, then it means we have to get paid for some of the feedstock we have to get paid for value adding the digestate and making fertilizer and recovering water. And in fact, it's more of a waste plant than it is an energy plant, because if you look at the revenues are about a third from energy, even at a good price, and the rest is from digestate and from gate fees. So it's a very difficult kind of market to originate a viable asset. The waste industry is also challenging. There isn't really formal contracting that happens in much of the waste industry, and their margins are very, very thin. It's highly competitive, and it's really a logistics game rather than a waste management game. So very challenging space to try and secure contracts in. There's also significant issues and costs and timeframes with planning. We've designed several of these plants in Queensland, Victoria, and New South Wales, and everywhere the regulatory process is different. The sign-off requirements are different. Everything is different. So there isn't, you've got to go back to first principles on every project to work out how to actually originate one of these projects and make it viable. I think Ben said there's very little deployment of biogas technology in Australia as projects. To give you a little bit of a temporal kind of indicator of that, a friend of mine, Jock Charles, when he was 19 in 1989, he built the first advanced anaerobic digester, tank-based, outside of sewage treatment in Australia at his piggery in Ballarat. At that time, Germany had 100. So Jock's piggery is, I think, 12,000 standard pig units, about 5,000 sows, full farrow to finisher unit facility. When he put that in 1989, Germany had 100. When we connected our client, Betterfield Piggery in Billawheeler, when we connected their plant to the grid in 2015, that was the second plant in agriculture and the third plant outside of sewage treatment in Australia. That's 25 years difference. In Germany, they had 8,500 plants connected to their electricity grid. In the last 5 years, when we've been pivoting to build, own and operate this portfolio of utility grade assets, Germany has now got 12,500 biogas plants connected to their electricity network and 190 plants connected to their natural gas network. So and we are still at about 5 or 6 in Australia. So we really have not adopted this technology at all to speak of in an industrialized fashion, and therefore there's a lack of primary data, there's a lack of first-hand experience, there's a lack of understanding and relationship to the equipment suppliers, and that presents a level of complexity and ambiguity for anyone who wants to start looking at it. The other thing that is a problem in Australia is traditional engineering delivery methods for infrastructure are really just not viable. At the moment, pretty much there'll be different counterparts involved in the process, from concept design to project definition to construction to commissioning to operation, and someone taking a markup of all the technology and trying to deliver it as a turnkey. And it cannot bear those costs, it cannot bear those markups. This kind of asset with no incentives in the market and the requirement to meet black parity as an energy offtake, it is just not possible for traditional engineering delivery models to deliver them. It has to be a lean, plug and play, end-to-end delivery, which is what we've established Utilitas to be able to do. So our biohubs secure local fuel, food, water and fertilizer, and I guess one of the key things we've had to do is to work out how we really join the loop between all of those things. And one of the things we've done at Bundaberg in our pilot scale facility that we've had there for a number of years is we've done pilot scale trials condensing the liquid phase digestate, and then we've run crop trials on capsicums to be able to demonstrate that we can make a precision liquid fertilizer and clean water as one of the byproducts of the digestion process. And that's the kind of game-changing thing, to be able to deploy that with the local energy, to be able to get back water and get back precision liquid fertilizers that can compete with chemical fertilizers. That is really the game-changing process that we've been working to realize at industrial commercial scale. The key thing you have to do in pulling, that's the Betterfield plant, by the way, in the background, and everyone who sees it says, oh, it's just tanks, pipes, pumps, generation system, grid connection system. Yep, that's it. It's actually not rocket science. The difficulty in Australia is joining up what we call the golden circle, which is pulling together all of those things to actually be able to build a viable asset. You need a land arrangement. These are 50-year life assets, so you need a land arrangement that is at a minimum 25 years for a financing arrangement, and ideally 50 years as its end game. You need to be able to lock in feedstocks from waste streams and get paid gate fees, because if you can't get paid gate fees, it's very, very difficult to make the project viable. You then need to have off-takes for the biomethane or the hydrogen or the biogas, in whichever form you want to take the energy. You need secure, reliable off-takes. You then need a process for facilitating irrigation, water recycling, or the reuse of clean water, or the supply of clean water into the market. You must monetize the digestate value. There has to be a value, otherwise it's just not viable to be able to produce the energy. You then need to go through planning approvals and connections, and we did a project on Queensland's biggest piggery before we built this facility at Billawilla, and for both of the projects we needed to negotiate to buy network assets back off the electricity grid owner. And those processes, in the first instance, the first one took 3 years and the second one took 1.5 years. So, you know, thankfully now we've moved to connecting to the gas network, and because of this write-down scenario, it appears they're being far more proactive in wanting to get renewable gas into the grid. So I'm hopeful that that's going to mean that the time horizons for connection arrangements are going to be less. But again, then we have to meet, and this is answering one of the questions, we need to meet the gas grid standards, or if it's going straight for transport fuel, we need to meet the transport fuel standards. Now, fortunately, just as this unit here is 2 times 100 kVA engines, or 125 kVA engines, packaged off the shelf completely in Germany, and is literally just cold connected and then hot connected when it arrives in Australia. So that kind of packaged equipment is very mainstream. This particular supplier has 6,000 of the 12,500 projects in Germany that are connected to the electricity network. And that is the case as well for gas upgrading equipment. It is possible to procure out of the German market completely packaged equipment, and the American market and the British market, completely packaged equipment to upgrade gas for transport and grid connection, as well as for electricity generation. This equipment exists. It's commercially available off the shelf, and it can be connected into projects in Australia. There are some complexities and challenges with it from a compliance point of view and a logistics point of view, but the equipment exists. So just to outline a little bit about our Bundaberg Biohub. So we're bringing together at Bundaberg, Utilitas is the developer. We're originating, designing, managing and optimizing the process. We also own the site. We have a partnership with a company called Green Eco Technologies. They have what's called the Waste Master unit, which dehydrates food waste from hospitalities, supermarkets and food retailers. And that actually allows us to aggregate high quality biomass paid with gate fees and store it. It's actually shelf stable for a year and still maintains its energy and nutrient value. So we're very excited about the Waste Master technology, and we'll be demonstrating it in a number of our projects, but we'll be launching our Bundaberg Biohub on the 1st of October and showing just what the Waste Master can do at that launch. We have ENGV, who are leaders in sustainable gas technology, integration, deployment, servicing and maintenance. They're working with us to get a gas grid connection for the Bundaberg Biohub. We have a relationship with a Silicon Valley a technology company that has a novel microwave plasma form of biogas to hydrogen technology, and we're working with them to demonstrate that at Bundaberg, but also deploy it on a number of projects around Australia. We have Scania involved in the project at Bundaberg, working with the Bundaberg Regional Council to run a trial of, in the first instance, it will be fossil CNG, compressed natural gas, and then when the bio CNG is available, it will be bio CNG. And so to give some figures to whoever asked, the target at Bundaberg is about 118 gigajoules a day from about 40 tonnes a day of silage and food waste. And that will allow us to refuel about 30 trucks or buses, and that's about a 300 horsepower kind of engine, those figures. So whoever wanted those figures, that's kind of, I guess, the thumb rules that we're working to up there. We have a relationship with Grenoff, who are mid-tier water industry constructor, operator and maintainer, and they'll be constructing our projects, operating and maintaining our small regional projects. So that's the project. Just to give everyone an understanding of what it takes to pull together one of these assets, I'll use the Bundaberg Biohub as an example. It has actually taken us 7 years, so let's just, to get the land arrangement, so let's just say we hope that's not custom and practice for the rest of our 100 portfolio, or I won't be around to see the first 20 of them. We've spent about $450,000 developing the project to date. We've put together all the site arrangements, the integration with the various sites. We've done feedstock testing and analysis in our laboratories. We've engaged with lots of different stakeholders to make the project a success. We have planning for the site, and we're working through specific approvals connections as we speak. We have draft front-end engineering design for the whole biogas component, which we're just updating, and we're now, we have structured the asset, and we're now finalising the contracts with the various counterparts so that we can put together what we call a project definition statement and submit it to a financing platform that we're working with, and hopefully they will be able to close the financing for us so that we can then construct the project. And the biogas to transport fuel project component is about $7 to $8 million. Utilitas will do the construction management, engineering, procurement, construction management, and Grenoff will be the head contractor and the site controller. We will then take about 12 months to construct and get it to commercial operating date, at which point we'll have a Biohub asset that will receive gate fees and treatment fees for taking organic waste, and will sell energy and sell fertilizer. And that project will earn somewhere in around 13 to 15% return on investment. Now, one of the challenges in Australia is most companies don't get out of bed for a return like that, and most financiers wouldn't even think about it. So finding financiers that have an appetite for projects that have very long payback periods in the scheme of things has been one of the challenges that we've had to pioneer. So I wanted to include this picture because that picture there is construction day one for us. That's demolition of the large trickle filter number 1 off the site, and we're actually now underway in our early works. You can see what we've done in our master plan. This is really the biogas kind of units. We're looking at contract fermentation, algae farming, fish farming, and some other biogas units going in here. We've got a greenhouse and some other things going on down the bottom. And up here, which is covered, we're hopeful to get a big grow house or a big recycling facility is talking with us at the moment. And the recarbon hydrogen plant will be sitting in here. In the middle here, behind this, we actually have 2 laboratories, one which the Bundaberg Regional Council operates and leases off us, and one which is our own. So essentially what we're doing is repurposing old infrastructure and turning it into new energy and resource recovery infrastructure. And our launch is on the 1st and 2nd of October, so if anyone wants an invite, there is a virtual event, please send me a note. And if you, even better, if you want a tenancy, we're very excited if you have grow house capability or algae farm, fish farming, anaerobic digestion, any of those things, we're now open for tenancies. So we'd be very delighted to speak with anyone. Thank you.
Thanks, Fiona. We've just got a couple of questions come in. Is there an economically viable threshold for such plants, i.e. a minimum population size?
For wastewater treatment to actually take an operating wastewater treatment facility, the story has always been that 0.5 megawatt is, which is about 500, probably about 500,000 equivalent persons, is really the threshold that anyone would start from. And that will actually only supply about 60% of the energy for the sewage plant if you only use sewage. But what we're working to prove that if you dance a little bit harder and you use packaged equipment and you have one counterpart that can bring it all together in one development, including the financing, then we think a 10,000 equivalent person plant co-locating with a 10,000 equivalent person plant can be made viable within the next 2 years. And in fact, we believe that so much that our 5th plant in our first 5 plants is in Casino in northern New South Wales, and that's co-located with a 10,000 EP operating sewage treatment plant. So that will be one of the top 5 projects that we work to start construction on in the next 2 years.
And is there any risk in competition for the feedstock or alternative disposal methods for reduced gate fees in the future?
100%, 100%, which is why we're attempting to prove that it's viable to link the digestate production to crop growing and be able to integrate one of these biohubs into the typical agricultural kind of supply chain. So for example, at Bundaberg, we're looking to upgrade some local farming land that is currently degraded through a regime of using our digestate to grow maize silage, sweet sorghum. We'll then silage it and use it up to 50% of it in our plant, but we still have to be paid for the other 50%. So it's at the moment at that scale, integrated in regional communities. It's about working it into the farrow crop, cash crop, land upgrading kind of cycle, if you like, and showing that that can be a viable solution.
I'll just put up the rest of the questions on the screen. Oh, hang on. That didn't work. Let me try again.
Will I screen? Will I unshare?
No, I think you have been unsharing. Can you see my screen now?
I can.
Great. So the first one is, thanks Fiona, great work. Did you have any social license issues with the Bundaberg project?
Not to date, but you know, I think I said in my vision that we want to still be valued by locals in 100 years. Our UTG 100 vision is 100 projects, 100 regional communities, 100 megawatts equivalent, which is 10 petajoules of gas, and still be loved by the locals in 100 years. That means every single day we work on our social license, every single day. We understand that some of these things are new and that people need time to come to grips with some of them, and we will feel we have failed if we don't maintain a social license for the next 100 years.
Thanks. And Jock asks, how much methane can be produced at a typical stop for big town city? What could that power?
Okay, so if I use, so pretty much 500,000 STP equivalent person sewage treatment plant is going to be about between 1 and 2 megawatts installed electrical capacity, and that's I've forgotten the electrical equivalent for a household. A household, an average Queensland household, I think, is 17 kilowatts over 24 hours. So if someone can do those maths, then there's the numbers. But basically, it probably is more about what is viable to go to the grid. So our Bundaberg project, which is Biohub 1, and our casino project, which is Biohub 5, they are both in regional communities where they will be relying to some extent on biomass that we have grown or contract grown through traditional contract growing mediums. Our three in the middle are actually on the edge of large cities, and where that's the case, then we can comfortably secure 200 tonne a day of industrial liquids, which is what we prefer, close coupled industrial liquids like DAF sludges, fogs, manures. They're the materials we prefer in our plants to use liquid waste. And in those areas, we'll produce about 350 gigajoules a day, equivalent of bio-CNG, and that basically is the minimum that you could get financed and backed to be able to connect to the grid. So there's going to be two types of these projects that roll out, about 40 tonne a day waste and biomass silage, about 118 gigajoules a day for local regional communities, and then larger grid connected gas grid connected projects that are of the scale of about 200 tonne a day of waste, where you have to get competitive gate fees.
So a follow-up question from Jock is, are active STPs suitable?
Yes, 100%. So casino is still an active sewage treatment plant, and so it's a combination. But don't forget, industry also have their own sewage treatment plants. So, wastewater treatment plants. So big food processors and big abattoirs, meat producers, other food and beverage processing, they typically have on-site wastewater treatment. And so these plants actually sit very well beside them as well. Someone asked here, could the equipment be made here? So in our supply chain, ENGV is a local company that does gas grid connection and pipeline connection and gas upgrading. A lot of the equipment, though, is commercially available off the shelf overseas, so they would be bringing it in and putting it in time. Can it be made here? Absolutely. And I guess when I first started Utilitas in 2010, I had this objective for it to be 100% Australian made. And then I realized I was just pushing a bit too much shit up a bit too many number of hills to try and do that all at once. But maybe if for the next 10 years we concentrate on getting some of these assets deployed, then we can maybe have a target from 2030 that is 100% Australian made equipment. But unfortunately, there's a little bit too much to take on at once to try and Australianize it completely. But yes, we are 100% trying to Australianize the equipment supply. Oh, I think you're muted.
Oh, thanks, Fiona. Back to you, Joe.
Okay, hold on. Just unmute. I'm there. Look, thanks, Fiona. Just one last questiony comment. It's Council Tractor STP link that we've sort of just been playing with. Ben's got methane tractors, you've got methane. Councils have tractors running around in, can refuel every day without going too far, mowing and doing what they do. That seems like a nice sort of fit together. Is that sort of a pipe dream, or is it a realness in there?
I've already said that I want the first methane tractor for Bundaberg. So,
Yeah.
We'll be hoping. We've just started something with council. Bioeconomy Bundaberg will be the 1st and 2nd of October. That's coinciding with our launch. And well, let's just hope that in 2021, maybe at Bioeconomy Bundaberg 2021, we might have a biomethane tractor if we can muscle our way into the list.
I'll do my best.
Yeah, all you got to do, Ben, is sneak over there and just change the label when they're selling it. I mean, when they're shipping it. So instead of saying Germany, so Bundaberg, Australia, got it.
We keep pretty close to the global platform guy. We talk regularly, so I'm doing my very best to weasel my way in.
Very good, very good. Okay. Look, I think we've all been sitting here for a good while. We're just going to have a 15-minute break, and then we're going to pop back and follow up with another version or another look at methane production with Joe down in Victoria. Then Charles from Pit and Cherry is going to give us a bit of an outline of different fuel mixes, and then when Neil's got a hydrogen update for us before Charlie Pearl closes off. So look, see you back here in 15 minutes, or let's just go for 3 o'clock kickoff again, okay? That gives us enough time to make a cup of tea and all that sort of stuff and have a stretch. So see you at 3 o'clock.